Prime Minister has hit Canadian farmers with a carbon tax that drives up food prices at the grocery store. Food prices that are rising again only months after he promised they would come down. I asked him late last year if he would talk to the Medeiros farm about their rising carbon tax bill. They just got their bill for December, and it is $21,000 in carbon taxes alone. I ask now, as I asked back then, how exactly will the Medeiros family pay this bill when it quadruples to over $80,000 a year?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
It's interesting that the Conservative leader is asking the government to help out the Medeiros family farm now, because back in 2014, when the Medeiros fan came to him in government, asked him for some support as they were trying to make investments, trying to continue to move forward, he told them that they needed to stand on their own 2 feet. That's what he told that farm. Mr. Speaker, we are there to support farmers right across the country with $1.5 billion over the past few years in investments, in supports. We're going to continue to be there for farmers as they fight climate.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Actually, when the Medeiros family asked for me for help, I went to Enbridge and helped them get lower-cost natural gas to power their operation, Mr. Speaker. That's the real story. So instead of reading the disinformation from the kids in short pants over in PMO, why doesn't he deal with the thing that's really hurting that family right now? A $21,000 monthly carbon tax bill that is passed on to the trucker who ships the food and the grocer who sells the food. So once again, how much will Canadians have to pay in higher food prices when he quadruples the carbon tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, back in 2014, he told that farm family to stand on their own 2 feet. We, Mr. Speaker, know what is making farmers vulnerable across this country. Do you know what it is, Mr. Speaker? It's climate change. It's the fact that a change in climate causes droughts, floods, and fires, which droughts, floods, and fires end up hurting crops, end up hurting growers. That's why we're stepping up on fighting climate change. Farmers across this country know how important it is to sustain and protect our land. That's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what we're going to continue to do.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He mentions drugs. That's another crisis that he has caused, Mr. Speaker. But back to the cost of food, heat, and groceries. This Prime Minister plans to raise the carbon tax again on April 1st. Another hike to the gas, the heat, the grocery bills. Another hit to the Nova Scotia families who can't afford to pay their utility bills. And another hit to working class families while he jets around the world carbon tax free. If he can't have the common sense to axe the tax, will he at least cancel his plan to hike the tax on April 1st?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You know what the Leader of the Opposition is proposing to cut for Canadians? The carbon rebate, Mr. Speaker. The checks that Canadians get in price on pollution is in place that they are relying on to enable them to both fight climate change and support their families. We are going to continue to be there to fight climate change and put more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadian families. When he talks about cutting climate action, he's also talking about cutting those checks that arrive in families' bank accounts 4 times a year.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Parliamentary Budget Officer, the average 60% of Canadians are paying more in his carbon tax than they get back in rebates. And now we learn that 40% of Nova Scotia households are struggling to pay their electricity bills. The carbon tax, of course, applies on the share of electricity that is generated through traditional hydrocarbons and other fossil fuels, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is going to hit Canadians with yet another tax hike on April the 1st. Will he, if he can't summon the common sense to axe the tax, will he at least cap the tax so Canadians can afford to eat?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are fighting climate change and creating a stronger economy at the same time as we ensure affordability for Canadians. Those carbon rebate checks that go right across the country in areas where the federal price applies help out 8 out of 10 families with more money than they pay in the price on pollution. We will continue to be there to both invest in families, to support them, while the Conservative leader proposes to cut rebate checks to Canadians. We're going to keep doing it while we fight climate change.
I know it's Wednesday, I know it's caucus day, I know that people are primed up, but I'm going to ask members, please let us restrain ourselves so that we can hear the questions and we can hear the answers. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, what this Prime Minister has is a pro-Russia energy policy that forces the Europeans to buy their energy from Russia by denying Canadians the ability to sell our own. He prefers military equipment for Putin instead of paychecks for Canadians. He does want to export detonators and turbines to Putin so he can pump his gas and power his landmines. Why doesn't he stop using Ukraine as a political tool and actually do something to stand up and help win the war?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The Right Honourable Prime Minister from the top, please.
Volodymyr Zelensky came to this House and asked all of us to support Ukraine in its fight for freedom and its economic independence. Volodymyr Zelensky asked us to support a renegotiation and a renewal of the Canada-Ukraine free trade deal. In this House, everyone except Conservative MPs stood up to support Volodymyr Zelensky.
The Prime Minister has 10 seconds left on the clock, but I'm going to ask all members, I'm going to ask in particular the member from Dufferin-Caledon, please, to allow the answer to be heard so that, because it's not only important for all of us and for Canadians to hear that, but it's important for members, especially members who require translation. They can't hear over the heckling. So let us make sure that we have an opportunity to hear clearly the questions and the answers. The Honourable Prime Minister, 10 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Speaker, Ukrainian Canadians from across the prairies are begging their MPs to please stand up for Ukraine. Will they do that, Mr. Speaker, in the upcoming Ukraine free trade vote?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, on this, like everything else, he is a fake and he is a phony. Let's go for the facts. Fake and he's a phony.
What I'm hearing so far is that after 8 years,
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition is a well-experienced man in Parliament. I would caution him to avoid using language like that could cause disruption and could be interpreted differently. The Honourable Member from the top, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
His carbon tax deal does not distract from the fact that he announced $400 million in surface-to-air equipment that he has still not delivered. What he did deliver is detonators to Putin so that Putin could put them in landmines and blow up Ukrainians. He delivered a turbine that was refurbished in Montreal so that Putin could put it in his pipelines and pump gas and make money off Europe that we should be bringing home to this country? Why is it that he always stands up for the dirty dictators like Putin instead of the paychecks for our people?
Once again, I would caution all members to be very careful about how they impugn motivations to other members, specifically to specific members. And this was the subject of a declaration which the chair had made back in October. And I encourage all members to please refer to it again to making sure that we keep on the right side of parliamentary language. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when the Leader of the Opposition refers to Ukraine as some faraway foreign land, when he continues to insist that all of his MPs, including Ukrainian Canadian MPs, vote against a free trade agreement that Volodymyr Zelensky is asking us to vote for to support Ukraine, he can't hide behind the kind of misinformation and disinformation that he regularly peddles in. It's very simple, Mr. Speaker. Will the members of the Conservative...
So I'm going to remind all members again. I know it's Wednesday, and I know that all members, but as I had to the same degree that I just made a statement to to a member in this House, I will make it again. Please be there. I would invite all members to please listen to their whips for a second, and I will... Please. Can you have them sit down when you're up? Thank you. It's important. I invite all members, please, to be very careful about impugning motivations or associating members with governments that we do find in this House to be disreputable, if not odious. So I'm just looking for all of us to make sure that we stay on the right, that we all wait and do our turn. And I will ask the honourable member from South Shore St. Margaret's to please come and speak to me at the chair, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss this. The honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he could not point to a single thing that I said that was untrue, because it is all factual. It is a fact that we already have an excellent trade agreement with Ukraine, that it does not include a carbon tax, and that there is no need for a carbon tax to be in any free trade agreement. In fact, there never has been a need for a carbon tax in any other free trade agreement in the history. But while he remembered a carbon tax, he forgot to include in the deal a ban on him sending detonators and turbines over to Putin. Why is it that he's so determined to allow Putin to acquire weapons and money rather than having a real free trade deal with Ukraine?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Official Opposition has an opportunity to correct the record from him having called Ukraine a faraway foreign land by allowing his Ukrainian Canadian MPs, at a very least, to vote in favor of the renewal of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement coming up for a vote in the coming days. It is an opportunity for those who choose to stand with Ukraine to stand with Ukraine in this House and be counted. Why is he muzzling his Ukrainian Canadian MPs?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we are 100% united in our support of Ukraine and in our opposition to the carbon tax. 100% united. This Here's what he does. He divides. He wants to distract from the fact that he doubled housing costs, caused 30 homeless encampments in Halifax, caused shootings to go up by 100%, drug overdoses up by 300%. It is no wonder that he would want to use fear and falsehoods to distract from his many failures, and that is exactly what he is doing. Why won't he finally unite this country instead of trying to divide and conquer?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this House used to be united in its support of Ukraine and its support of Volodymyr Zelensky. And yet now we see.
I'm going to please ask the Prime Minister to start up again. I'm going to ask all members please to listen to the response without interruption so that we can have an orderly House. Prime Minister from the top.
Mr. Speaker, this House used to be united in its unequivocal support for Ukraine, and then the Leader of the Opposition disparagingly referred to Ukraine as a faraway foreign land, something for which he has not yet apologized, and has demanded that all his MPs, including Prairie MPs who have strong Ukrainian-Canadian populations, vote against a free trade deal that Volodymyr Zelensky has deliberately and directly asked Canadians to support. When will he stand up for Ukraine?
This Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing, which has doubled since he promised to lower it. But there is good news. Rent is down for the 8th consecutive month in the United States. Meanwhile, it has more than doubled under this Prime Minister. It's up 9% in the last year alone. Can the Prime Minister explain why is rent going down in the States while it skyrockets under his leadership here at home?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I'd like to give the Leader of the Opposition another opportunity to apologize for referring to Ukraine as disparagingly as a faraway foreign land.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, the question was about rent in Canada. Rent prices have doubled after 8 years of this Prime Minister. They have tripled in his home city of Montreal. And now, according to the Home Builders of Canada, they expect that construction numbers will actually plummet this year relative to the prior years. They say that this will lead to higher prices, and they say we require, quote, policy changes to reverse it. Will the Prime Minister finally accept a common sense plan to build the homes so Canadians can afford the rent?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, I didn't hear an apology to Ukrainians. I encourage him to do that. People are waiting for it. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, I can remind this House that we have signed dozens of housing accelerator fund agreements across the country that are leading to the construction of hundreds of thousands of new homes in the coming years. We've eliminated GST off of purpose-built rental apartments. We're moving forward on an interest-free savings account for first-time homebuyers. But again, I encourage the Leader of the Opposition to apologize for referring to Ukraine as some faraway foreign land.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it just proves that what I said earlier. He's not interested in Ukraine. When I asked about rental prices, he started spreading disinformation about Ukraine. He couldn't care less about the war effort over there. He only cares about distracting from his failures at home. Rent, and instead he turned and made false attacks against me. Apparently, I'm living rent-free in his head. Here's the reality. Rent is going down in the States while it's coming up in Canada. Housing costs have risen 40% faster than the incomes of Canadians, the worst record in the G7, and the second worst in the OECD. If the Prime Minister's plan were really working, why is it that housing costs have doubled and our housing is becoming less affordable than almost any developed country in the world?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to leave aside the question of where exactly he's living rent-free and focus on the supports we're giving to Canadians. We are continuing to invest in meaningful ways in partnership with municipalities, with unions and building trades, with provinces across the country to solve this housing crisis that Canadians are feeling so acutely. Whether it's cutting the GST from purpose-built rental, whether it's moving forward with a tax-free savings account for first-time homebuyers, whether it's putting $4 billion in the pockets of municipalities across the country to increase density, to cut red tape, we are taking action on housing.